Almost 3 decades into democracy, the majority of black South Africans still face land injustices. Some activists say the revolution is incomplete while the majority don't have land. They say freedom and democracy do not mean much to the landless.
Perhaps due to the passage of time, 108 years to be precise, we do not fully comprehend that with the stroke of a colonial pen, literally overnight, our forebearers were stripped not only of their dignity, but of their greatest economic asset, which is the land.
3 decades into freedom and democracy, much still needs to be done to rectify this.
If you don't have land, you can't say you have democracy. There's no democracy if you don't even have a place to stay.
And some political heavyweights are now capitalizing on this frustration and calling for land grabs.
When we live here, you see any beautiful piece of land, you like it, occupy it, it belongs to you.
Many are growing impatient with government's slow pace of addressing the land issue. Some have resorted to land grabs. This piece of land in Eersterus is one of many countrywide occupied by desperate people in search of shelter. They say landlessness is a direct onslaught on their dignity and denies them access to economic freedom.
There's no jobs, there's no opportunities, there's just people are getting frustrated. That is why these land grabs are taking place.
Since 1994, not a single RDP house has been built in Eersterus. This land has been standing vacant for decades. People who occupied it last year say they are tired of empty promises.
How can you be free if you've been marginalized? And how can you be free if you know there's no equality in the land, in the country? How can you be free?
On this land, they hope to restore their dignity and also reap the fruits of freedom.
Since I'm here, I feel free. Since I've been living here, I feel very free.
But as frustration mounts, government is under pressure to resolve the land inequality.
How do you build an inclusive South Africa if you don't address the issues of inclusivity when it comes to land question?
They keep on preaching it that they're going to give the land back to the rightful owners, but we're not sure. Is it ever going to happen?
Pending finalization of the land expropriation without compensation bill, government wants to propose land court legislation to expedite land claims.
I have no doubt that the introduction of the land court bill will promote access to land on an equitable basis and contribute to a speedy resolution of land-related matters and contribute to nation building and restoration of the dignity of our people.
While the bill on its own may not be a silver bullet which can help us undo the effects of colonialism, it is an important step which can enable land reform.
Experts have reiterated that landlessness exacerbates the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and high unemployment. Much hope is pinned on amending Section 25 of the Constitution to ensure land expropriation without compensation. While the country waits for policymakers to effectively address the issue of landlessness in the country, many desperate citizens, like these ones here, say that land grabs are their way, their only way to affirm their dignity while the country celebrates freedom and democracy. Patricia Fasachi, SABC News in Eersterus, Pretoria.
Staying on the story, our reporter asked legal expert Adv Tembeka Ngcukaitobi to interrogate how land inequality has affected the black majority and why the process of land restoration is slow.
Almost 3 decades into democracy, the black majority of South Africans still find themselves facing an onslaught of land injustice. And we ask this question: how can South Africans, in particular the black people of this country, be free? How can they truly appreciate democracy when they still have a land hunger?
It is not possible to talk of complete freedom when people are hungry and deprived. What we have witnessed in the post-constitutional era is that the levels of deprivation have been getting increasingly worse, and the levels of inequality have been growing. So it is that problem that threatens the ability in the next 25 years or in the next 27 years for us to speak confidently about true and genuine liberation. So unless we are able to match what is called socio-economic rights with the civil and political rights, freedom will only be partial. This is where we are at this point. It's partial freedom.
The ANC government, as they are the governing party, are they doing enough to expedite land reform in the country?
The policy of the government is to compensate landowners either at market value or sometimes even above market value. So in relation to those two areas, which is the rhetoric not matched by practice and a constitutional promise effectively subverted by actions of the government, then it becomes clear that the ANC government does not really rank land as a primary and important social good that is to be enforced and implemented in order to realize the promise of the Constitution. So we, in fact, getting further and further away from that promise.
How does South Africa then reach economic freedom in our lifetime without, expediting the question of land when so many black South Africans are still landless?
So we cannot talk about land without situating it in a larger context of economic emancipation of African people. So on the agenda, we ought to talk about a restorative or a reparative project of economic emancipation. One of them, as we already pointed out earlier, is to think about how, in fact, to undertake a restitutionary project. We have many land claims lodged in 1998 remaining unresolved. That is a failure not of the past but of the present. The structure that the government has set up is simply not functional enough. The last statistics drawn up by the government between 2013 and 2017 showed that more than 70% of commercial agricultural land is held in white hands, whether by individuals or corporates, but it's held in white hands. Only 4% is held in African land, of commercial agricultural land. So that picture, if you compare both the restitution front, which we are still talking about 9%, and the redistribution front of land, that picture is an unpromising one, illustrating what I describe as a catastrophic failure.
It goes back to perhaps the issue of proper political will to adequately and I think effectively address the issue of land.
The politicians speak with radically sounding slogans, but those slogans do not translate into practice. So they will push back and claim that land, of course, matters, but the people that are on the receiving end of landlessness, they will say, in our own experience, your conduct shows that land does not matter. So it's by matching the rhetoric with practical experience that land, in fact, starts to matter to both the recipients and the administrators.
How would you perhaps try to link that injustice that happened so many years ago with what black people are currently facing in terms of the economic opportunities, the limitations thereof that in particular the black youth has to battle with?
The economic structure established under colonialism and perfected under apartheid, its features are largely dominant in South Africa's economy because the key feature was dispossession, the lack of ability to acquire and hold on to property. That feature remains. But another feature was the deprivation of opportunity to acquire skills in order to participate in the economy. That feature, again, because of our inability to expand educational opportunities, remains. But then another feature, it was to set up a structure of the market which pretended to be free and open, but at the same time it was overlaid by a fundamentally unjust and a fundamentally racist legal system. The struggle to undo those three elements is the struggle of today.
In recent years, we've also seen an increase, a rapid increase of land grabs. What does this say about South Africans? Is this a desperation that's pouring out on the public domain?
Most so-called land grabs are taking place around places of high economic activity. And there has been a systematic movement away from the Bantustans and the villages. And there has been a rapid urbanization. In fact, I think the World Bank report showed that in the past 20 years, we've had a 62% urban migration in South Africa. We've got to look at how the tenure system in the informal sector ought to be regulated by law, so that those relationships between those who occupy the land and those who purport to own it are not governed by power, but they are governed by law, which is embedded with the principles of justice. But it also means that we've got to start making urban land available. Current government policy has an agricultural and a rural bias, because land for a long time has always been taken to mean agricultural land. But the practical reality shows that until you focus on making urban spaces available for human occupation on an equitable basis at affordable prices and in a legally regulated way, you are not going to resolve this link between the need for housing, the need for land, and the need for economic opportunities.
Can we truly appreciate freedom and democracy while we are still in the paralysis of landlessness?
It is not possible to talk of complete freedom when people are hungry and deprived. What we have witnessed in the post-constitutional era is that the levels of deprivation have been getting increasingly worse, and the levels of inequality have been growing. So it is that problem that threatens the ability in the next 25 years or in the next 27 years for us to speak confidently about true and genuine liberation. So unless we are able to match what is called socio-economic rights with the civil and political rights, freedom will only be partial. This is where we are at this point. It's partial freedom.
Advocate Ngcukaitobi, they're just taking us into the issue of landlessness in the country as we mark yet another year of freedom and democracy. On that note, it's back to you in studio.